Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hi friends, welcome to another weekly wrap up, and today we have quite a few books to go over. I'm very excited. So those of you who like a longer video, I'm sure you can tell based on the runtime of whatever this will end up being, but grab a drink, grab a snack, grab your breakfast, grab a book to read while you listen to me, open up your Amazon cart and get ready to add some good books into it, because this was a great reading week. There was some rereads, there was some big surprises, there's some upcoming reads that I read, and yeah, there's some great stuff in here, so definitely get ready for that. We have a little bit of opening business here and then we'll get right into the book. So we do have two new patrons to welcome to the channel. I'm so happy to have you here. We have Amber and Kelly, who both joined the Patreon. I'm actually thinking of doing an updated Patreon intro, because it's kind of funny. I've added tiers since, I first started. I've added other tiers in there. And also it's just, the vision you have for your Patreon when you first start it. It's not that my vision has changed. My purpose for my Patreon and what I do with it is still there, but it's just evolves a little bit as you get your feet under you and as you, figure out which things you actually consistently will do and everything like that. And also what viewers like the most about it. But anyway, that's just a bit of back thought as I was like, maybe I should film an updated intro video because it's been so long and everything like that. But anyway, also I do have, of course, a sale going on my Etsy right now. I'm trying to do some summer clean out before the fall, and I know that the fall designs are a lot of people's favorites, so I plan to make a good amount of stock of those. But right now, everything on my Etsy shop is, if you buy 3 or more items, it's 30% off, right? And this includes all the way from the bookmarks all the way up to the biggest items like my computer sleeves and my hardback sleeves and everything. But all of the items are 3 or more are 30% off, and that's going to be running basically through the rest of the summer, like I said, to get ready for some fall designs and everything, which should be fun. And yeah, that is what I have for that. Let's get into the books today. So let me pull up my notes here to go through for you. All right, so the first book that I read was a very big surprise for me. It was Ensnared by Rebecca Quinn. So this book was on my 12 recs from 12 friends, and I had it on kind of my, I had it on my TBR for this month, but I haven't been the best at getting to the 12 recs for 12 friends that I did. I did make a video about that. I will link it if I can remember to. And I've only made it through 5 of the 12 I'm supposed to get to, right? There's just been a lot of things calling for my attention, and I haven't gotten to some of these. But some of these I've read have been absolute favorites or have introduced me to authors that I really, really love. And I just like that so much, right? Like Unsteady was one of these choices, and so was a Daisy Jane. So I do still try to get to them. But this one was recommended by Lorena Y. And she recommended Ensnared. And I will say, I am kind of glad that I ended up waiting to read this one, which I'll tell you soon, because the second book is already out now. And when that was recommended to me, only the first book was out, and this is a trilogy. And I would have been very upset if I didn't have the second book to read right away. And the third book, which if you've seen my August TBR, you'll know I already put the third book on that TBR because there was another cliffhanger. But anyway, what is this about? Well, this is a dystopian Why Choose. Okay, it was a Why Choose. So if you're fans of my channel, you'll know that Why Choose is not Jen's bag of tricks. Okay, it's not what I normally like to read. I do like poly romance, but I tend to want everyone to be fucking each other. I really, really do. There are very few authors where when they don't have them all together, that I still like it. Very, very few of them. But I'd heard really good things about this. And now I'd heard that the audiobooks were what people really liked, because I believe it's dual narration and there's 6 people in this, right? Because there's 5 men and the heroine in this. Now I didn't end up getting the audiobook for a couple different reasons, mostly because I don't purchase a lot of Audible audiobooks. I just do my 1 credit a month because I get so many books that I have to do ARCs for, like ELC. Anyway, you guys don't need the whole story. But the point is I just got the Kindle Unlimited and I started reading it. And I was immediately sucked in. I had forgot that this was a dystopian book, and I love those. You guys know I've made a couple rec videos that are just focused on dystopian and survival stories. So I was immediately like, ooh, okay. And sorry, my makeup is getting in my eye a little bit, and that's bothering me. And I could immediately see where this one was going. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. Okay, so it's dystopian, and we have our heroine whose name is Eden, of course, because it's going to be like, that's why there's an apple and a snake on the cover, which made it look fantasy to me for some reason. I don't know what I was vibing from this, but, you know, it's Eden in the apple and Eve and all that good stuff. But this is basically, at the beginning, a sex deal for safety. And you guys, I also love those. I also love those. Claire Kent has a lot of those, and I've read quite a few, you know, romances that have that. And so we have Eden, who in the beginning of this book, she's on the run. She has been spotted by a couple of men. These will not be our heroes in this, but she's been taking care of herself for a while. Since the world all went to hell, it's went to hell. There was, I don't fully know what went wrong with the world, but she, has been on her own, and she's been living in a cave, and she's even had a little garden, and she's been taking care of herself, and she is spotted by these men, and so now she's on the run, and this group of men who are chasing her has grown and grown and grown, and now she's running from like 15 to 20 men who are trying to capture her, and I'm sure you can imagine what they want to do with her. It's not going to be anything good. And she stumbles across 3 men. I believe she stumbles across Dom, Lucky, and Bo, is I think who she stumbles across. But they happen to be out getting water, and they run into her. And one of the men really wants to help her right away. That's Lucky. One of the men is like, leave her to her own devices. It's not our problem. And one of them is like, offers to basically have her come with them. And she's very overwhelmed, and they're like, we won't force you into anything, but if you come back with us, you have to be with everyone. Now, she's not really like focusing on what they're asking or what's going on. She just realizes that they seem a lot more reasonable. And I mean, they are pretty good looking too. We won't deny that. And they seem a lot more reasonable than this pack of rabid men who want to, you know, rape her and force her to do whatever. So she goes with them, and she gets brought back to Bristlebrook. So this series is called The Brutes of Bristlebrook, and she meets the other 2 men that are a part of this group, which is Jasper and Jack. Now, the way this works, Jasper is actually the owner of Bristlebrook. This is his family estate. It is built kind of like into a mountain. It's actually very hard to see it like from above. You can't tell that it's there. You really only get into it if you know exactly where it is. His family was very wealthy, and this was actually left to him. And he is actually a psychiatrist, and he was a psychiatrist that worked with military men. And the other 4 men, Jack, Dom, Bo, and Lucky, they are all actually were in the military and had worked together. And so when everything went to shit, through some things, which again, I won't explain every single detail of this book, I'm already going deep enough into it, they ended up coming back to Bristlebrook together to kind of like live it out. And they had previously had people stay with them. Things had went badly. They'd had women there that it had been kind of a mess between everyone. And so blah, 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 whatever the reasons are, she's welcome to stay with them if she's willing to be with all 5 of them. Not necessarily together, but she has to be willing to give each of them equal time because they don't want anyone getting jealous and they don't want anyone to feel bad. That's what this starts out as anyway, is they give her a little bit of time to agree to this, and then they're like, we're literally going to draw straws and you're going to go with these men in order that we get. And so she agrees to do this because she's like, well, at least it's reasonable. At least I'm going to be fed and cared for, and they're never going to like force me into anything. But it is also, you know, pretty heavily implied like she's going to have to be okay with having sex with all of them. And we also discover that they each have their own kinks that they're into. And there's some very complicated dynamics that we get into as we go. So that's as much as I'm going to explain about the setup of it. And what I will say though is that if you're someone who is uncomfortable with there being this like exchange of sex for safety, I am not. As I said, I love those kind of stories. I like when a woman can take her power however she can. And if that means using her body for it, well, we've done it our entire existence of women and men. Like women have traded their bodies for safety. And in some cases, that's what marriage used to be anyway, right? So I'm cool with it. But we also will see that it's not going to stay that way for the whole series. Like that is our initial setup. So there are some also complicated dynamics between the men, which is what I really liked. Jasper and Lucky, they kind of have this weird almost situation going between the two of them. Dom and Bo, they've actually shared women before. They had a pretty disastrous experience doing that, but they have always shared women before and really like that. So there are some like MFM and MM situations within this relationship. There's also one of the men who's very possessive, and at one point through the world he's like, well, she's only going to be with me. He is very possessive. So there's lots of different dynamics going on, and I just was really sucked into it, especially the first one when we were just dealing with all of these emotions and back and forth and trying to decide how this is going to work. I thought it was very interesting. We get POVs of everybody. And there was a really big cliffhanger at the end of book 1, though, as I said. And so we will get into Entangled right now. We'll just talk about Entangled right now because I read quite a few books in between, but I also did like pretty much start Entangled right away afterwards. I just then fit some other books as well. So we'll talk about Entangled now. So Entangled then was book 2. It picks up right where Ensnared ended, which is great because again there was a big cliffhanger, and I don't want to spoil what was going on, but we have more of the emotional, you know, issues, right? This is where the entangled part of it is coming in. Are we going to be a why choose scenario? Is someone going to make her choose? Is there more love between two of the men within it than there will be them for her? Like lots of messy stuff. And then also the real world is intruding on this too now. There's a lot, we're getting to see more of what's happening in the world overall in the second one, and how those other aspects might be threats to our reverse harem that we have going on here. And that led to another big cliffhanger with Entangled. And Entwined, as I said, comes out in August. I think it's like August 13th or 15th. I don't know. It's in the first 2 weeks of August. So very excited for that one. But what did I like rate these, and what's the spice rating for these? Let's do that and then we'll move along. So with Ensnared, I actually gave that a 4.5 because I really was enjoying it. I really, really was. And because it was the first of a trilogy, I wasn't expecting things to get resolved. I wasn't expecting any of that. I liked what I was getting of each of the men. There actually wasn't as much spice in that one as I thought, which I also thought was an interesting choice. Like, this isn't just an erotic story at all. Like, there's a lot of emotions going on in it. So it was actually about a 4 on my spice scale. And some of the kinks involved in this one are voyeurism, edging, praise kink, and sadism. Some of those are all tiptoed into within here. And then trigger warnings for this: there's assault, there's threat of rape. There wasn't any in this at all, but it's all like threatened and also mentioned that it's happened to other people. Again, this is a dangerous world we're living in. There's kidnapping, violence, and PTSD. And I said, once you read this, be ready to immediately pick up the next one. So what did I think of Entangled? Now, Entangled, as I've said, there was a lot added to it. I got very frustrated partway through this book, and I had to kind of, when I was getting towards the end of it, I had to be like, this is the second in a trilogy. There has to be more conflict happening because this is the middle part of a story, right? And our author really is writing a true trilogy. This story does need 3 books. There are 6 different POVs we're getting, as I said. There are all these different relationships that we're working on, including a relationship as a whole. So this type of story is the type where I feel like a trilogy is warranted. So when I was getting to the end of this, I had to be like, Jen, you always complain about reverse harems not giving enough time to everyone, and you always complain about, you know, it not being paced well enough. And I had to check myself and be like, okay, is doing what I asked. And I probably will feel even more favorable towards this book once I've finished it and I can see the full story. That's just what's hard about a trilogy, where I'm someone, I would like my satisfaction to happen eventually, and it just feels like it wasn't there. But she did give us some very good spice in this one, and we got to see more of everybody interacting together, which was pretty. There's particularly a chunk near the end of this one that is about 10 chapters worth of this special night that they have where everybody's like, it was wild. It was wild. But even still, I ended up on a 4 with this one because, again, I was very mad at it for a while. It was tough to finish around the halfway mark because I was getting so pissed at it. But again, she's going through a certain arc with this, right? So I gave it a 4 by the end. Again, with the potential that maybe I'll feel more favorable about it later on. I don't know. And then this one, it's a 4, 4.5 on the spice scale. Again, there's some very spicy stuff that happens in that chunk I'm talking about. But there's also a good part of this book, which is 600 and some pages. How long is this one? Like 640 pages is how long this one was. And a lot of that sexy time was only in kind of the end. So, you know, my spice scale goes for the acts of spice that happen as well as how many there is, right? That's how my spice rating goes. So, anywho, moving along. I read Golden Touch by Serena Bowen. This is her newest release. It's a part of the Guilt Maker series. They're the beer brewers. This does connect her like contemporary world. They all kind of connect together somehow. But this one directly comes after oh man, I don't remember the first one in this series, but it was the one where there was, I know Mateo was the hero and the heroine wanted to have a baby and he agrees to be the one to do it, right? They do baby making, but then she wants to raise the kid on her own. Like, it was weird. Anyway, I liked the first book. This one is about the brother to the heroine of that one, and he's come into town to help out because his sister is like on bed rest before the baby comes. So that's when this one is set. It kind of backs up a little bit again. So he's in town to help with that because the dad, he has this he had this infection where he's needing to get daily like treatments, and the dad is very possessive over the brewing business and he doesn't want anyone else involved in it, and it actually chased his son away. So the son, Nash, he's actually been working in the beer business, but with a different brewery somewhere else because his father kind of chased him out. But he comes back to town to help out his sister and his dad, even though his dad is a grouchy asshole. He definitely is. Nash is there to help. And he is interacting with Livia, who is basically the office manager and right-hand woman to the father. And she is actually a woman on the run. She actually gets paid in cash every other week because she is on the run from a motorcycle club where she used to date the president. And once she found out that they were a crooked group, she was already too far in with them. And she ended up being actually abused by this man, and she barely escaped with her life. And so that's why she works there. She hides out a lot. She knows they're looking for her because she knows some information that they don't want her to know. And yeah, she's basically like hiding who she is and stuff like that. But her and Nash actually end up living together because while he's in town, he's offered one of the other bedrooms like at her place. And so she really doesn't want a man living with her. She doesn't trust easily, and she also doesn't want him learning her secrets and all of that stuff and everything. So yeah, very interesting situation for the two of them anyway. But yeah, they slowly end up falling for each other, and as Nash starts to unravel her secrets and how she got in this situation, he's there to kind of help her find freedom from this group. So I very much enjoyed this story. I really did. It was good. It was kind of like, he never felt like she was an enemy, but she kind of saw him as an enemy type of thing. She was very distrustworthy, but he was a really fun guy. And also he ends up working on the relationship with his father, who again has basically chased him out of the business because he wouldn't trust him and everything. So it was very interesting. So I ended up on a 4.5 star with this one. Oh, and I listened to the audiobook of this one. It was Tim Page and Samantha Brentmore. So great pairing for that. Love those two. This one was a a $7.50 upgrade on Audible. And Golden Touch is not actually in Kindle Unlimited, so you do have to buy that one, but then the audiobook is only a $7.50 upgrade for that one. Okay, next up, I read Two Wrongs by Kimberly Carrillo. This is the pick for Patreon this month, so I already have my review available there. You can get access to this actually with the free trial. You get a 7-day free trial if you sign up for the Swooning for You level and above, and you would get access to this because I don't talk about my Patreon books on here. Obviously, it's exclusive to them, but this was for an ex's dad, but it actually is even a little more complicated than that, because our heroine, she hasn't quite gotten away from her husband yet, and so this is actually a husband's dad, not an ex-boyfriend's dad. So it was very interesting. So yeah, I have lots of thoughts over on Patreon. You can go and check that out. I always have a link down below to that. All right, then I reread, oh, did I not grab that? I don't know where it is. I reread Your Dad Will Do by Katie Robert. This was actually for Patreon. One of my patrons wanted this one annotated, and that was fun. It was a nice little novella. I remember when Katie was writing these, I was actually a member of her Patreon back then. During the pandemic, she had just, her Patreon was popping back then. I was part of her like paperback club too, so I got paperback copies of all her new releases. It was great back before I kind of have not been reading as many of her books anymore, but it was great to revisit this one. It was very spicy. This one is a ex's dad as well, and Lily goes to fuck her ex's dad for revenge because he's cheating on her, and so she has a spicy little weekend with Shane where they act out all their fantasies and they fuck each other silly, and then they decide if they're going to keep trying after that or not. So very spicy, very naughty, and yeah, I gave this one a 3.5 star. It's a 5 on the spice scale though. It's erotica. It's all fucking all the time, and there's some daddy kink cam work. Actually, they like to record themselves, and there's some voyeurism there. So, all right, next up, I read The Program by Comfortable Silence. Yes, this one is a fan fiction. And this one is a Dramini fanfic. I've been more in the mood for a Dramini lately. I read a couple this week, actually. And this one is an Omegaverse. I've shared, I really have been liking Harry Potter Omegaverses. Is kind of where I like reading Omegaverse. I don't know. It just feels like it fits into the world really well, which I think is interesting. So, yeah, this one, it was a nice little short one. And it's Hermione finding out she is an Omega. Maybe she already knows, I don't know, but she's going through her first heat, and there is this program where you can sign up to be with an alpha, and you guys don't have to know who each other is. You basically get paired based on the pheromones. Like, you get to kind of like smell a sample of the alpha and see which one you're like Omega vibes with the most, and then you guys will get paired, and they're glamored the whole time, so you don't see who the person is that you are fucking for the whole time. And so she, of course, gets paired with Draco, and they have this amazing experience. And when they get paired together a second time, some of the questions that they ask, like, they start to figure out who each other are. Now, the glamour doesn't work once you figure out who the person is. So now they know. And now Hermione's like, oh my God, I can't be with him. This is Draco. And Draco's like, why can't we be together? Like, look at how well we fit together. We're meant to be. And so there's some tension with that anyway. But this one was pretty good. I gave it 4 stars. It was spicy. It was shorter. It was only like 240 pages or something, so it was a nice little quick one. I'll have a link down below to the program so you can read it if you want to. All right, then I had another reread. This one is for The Antihero by Sarah Kate. I'm now a part of Sarah Kate's ALC team going forward, so I'll be getting advanced listening copies of her books, which is, you know, fantastic. I love reviewing audiobooks so much, but I had never listened to any of the audiobooks in this series yet. I have listened to some of her previous books on audio. And so as like a gift for becoming a part of the ALC team, they sent us the audiobook of The Antihero so that we could review it and kind of hype it up for everybody, because we have the what's coming next? The Heartbreaker. Heartbreaker is the third one that's coming out. So yeah, this was great. I also, I had reread the Antihero because someone had me annotate that for them before, but it had been a hot minute since I read it. So it was really good to be reminded of how everything got started with this. And if you haven't read this series, I find this one very interesting. I was talking about this with a friend, is that this one is about a pastor of a megachurch in Texas who we discover is a member of a sex club, and he's been lying to his family and cheating on his wife. And the oldest son, Adam, he finds this out when he discovers some info in his dad's papers that show he owns this building downtown, and it turns out to be the sex club that he's a member of, and now he owns part of it, and he is going there to see people. And Adam confronts him, and the dad is so cocky and so sure of his position that he beats the shit out of Adam and is like, you're not going to tell anyone because it'll ruin your life too if you out me. And Adam is furious about this. And at the same time, we have Sage, who she had been dating the owner of this, actually had invested in this before, only to discover that her partner had sold this business out from under them, right? Like, the loan that he got from this preacher basically meant that he owned it. And so all of her time and investment she's put into this sex club, which she actually loves, she's seen him destroy it. And so she quits and she's done for. But her and Adam have actually bumped into each other before when they didn't really know who each other was. And when he goes to that sex club to confront his dad, he actually sees Sage there. And she ends up taking him home to take care of him after he's beat up by his dad, as we said. And they actually end up hooking up, have this like sexual experience with each other. And then Adam is just very lost. He doesn't know what to do. And they end up coming up with a plan that to ruin the father, he needs to ruin his own reputation. And by doing so, he can force his father to, like, you know, be outed or whatever. And so they end up creating basically an OnlyFans. They basically create that. And they're posting sexual content on there so people can see and talk about it and make it awkward for the dad and everything. So what I meant to say about this one is that I feel like this was a very interesting take on kind of having like religion be in a book, because the way that Sarah Kate approached it, she never was attacking the faith in this one. It's very clearly she's attacking hypocrites like the father is, and people who are using religion to make money and not because they believe in it. And to me, that was very clear when I was reading it, as someone who, as I've said many times, I am a Christian myself. And so reading Christianity in books or reading like religious trauma and stuff, it can be difficult for me, but also it's usually pretty easy for me because my own personal faith, I rarely actually see it in books. And so when people are going through religious trauma or talking about those things, I have a lot of empathy for it because I have people in my life who have that, but I myself don't feel like my religion is being attacked. And again, the way that this one is approached, the way that she approaches it in here, like Adam never really loses his faith in God. He's losing his faith in his father, who he thought was this faithful man who was, you know, this great, you know, well, he didn't think he was a great family man because he knew his dad had fucked up, but he was inspired by him in certain ways. And so to have that come crashing down, you know, there's a point in the book where Sage asks him, like, do you still believe in God? And Adam's like, I do. He's like, I don't blame God for what my father did. You know, he has his own personal relationship, but he also doesn't push it on Sage, which I liked as well. So I don't know. Me personally, I thought it was a very interesting take on it. And, you know, I've read 2 books in this series so far, right? And for at least so far, she's not attacking Christians themselves, or that she is attacking people who use it for their own aims and are actually phonies, which I agree with. I don't like those people either. So there you go. I liked my reread of this, which, sorry, the narrators of this were Jacob Morgan and Vivian LaRue, and this was a duet style narration, so it was wonderful. Love that so much. And yeah, this is an erotic romance for sure. There's a little bit of kink in it, specifically some degradation. There's a little bit of spit that goes on in here. Not a ton, but it was pretty hot. And also like Adam trying to get used to being okay with it, because he feels that he's degrading Sage, which he is, but she's asked him to, and they kind of got to work through that. So I really like this one. This one is a 4-star for me. It's a 4 on the spice scale, and yeah, definitely is some religious trauma, abusive parent, so be prepared for that. But like Sarah Kate, she does a good job. Okay, next up, I had a reread of Haven by Claire Kent. I was annotating this for one of my patrons. One of my patrons, she's amazing. You know who you are. She wants this entire series annotated. I have annotated certain books in the series before for people, but I haven't done a full reread. So I'm actually very happy that she has picked these, because the last book in the series is coming in October. Now, the way that it's worked out, I only do 1 book a month for the person, but I might actually like read ahead, because I want to do a reread before we get to the final book, Beacon, which I'm so excited for. Like, I can't even tell you how excited I am for Beacon. And even reading Haven, going all the way back to the beginning book, Mac, who the last book will be about, is mentioned in here. This big, lovable, tough black man who's been helping, you know, with this underground network of survivors who are connected and helping people get by. And he's been the backbone of that all this time. And anyway, this book isn't about him, but we see him in this one when he's kind of like recruiting other people into this network, and we see him throughout the series. He's mentioned in almost every book, and so especially in Homestead, we see the lead up to what the last book will be, and I just love it. So anyway, this one is about Jackson and Faith, though, and they run New Haven. And New Haven, this is the novella that kind of sets the story off, although I personally always see Last Light as like the first book. Last Light is technically a companion to the series, the way that Claire Kent says. Again, to me, it's kind of a first book or whatever, because we also see Travis and Lainey in this one as well, and we see Faith and Jackson in their books, so there is that crossover like that. And we see Faith and Jackson, who are pretty young. I believe she's 21 and he's like 26. And what New Haven was is it was her family like farm basically, and her parents, who she was the only biological child of her parents, but her parents were these really wonderful people who wanted to give kids a second chance, and so they basically ran this farm where foster kids could come or troubled kids could come. And you know, she was like, my parents weren't saints, they just wanted to give kids a chance. And when the apocalypse went down, there was some kids already staying there, right? And Jackson was one of them, who he had actually already was a worker there. He'd come there when he was 16. He loved working there. He was good at it, and he had actually become a paid worker after he had like aged out and everything, so he'd been around. And when everything went down, and eventually when we lose Faith's parents, Jackson and Faith basically become the heads of this town, and they're the authority in this place. But this town is mostly younger people, because they've taken on youths that they've come across, and it's basically still a place to get a second chance. But Jackson does run a very strict thing. There are a lot of rules for their safety, and Faith is, you know, him and her are kind of they're the leaders of this town. And we discover right away, because this is a novella, that they also, they sleep with each other for relief at night sometimes. They don't talk about it. She will just sneak into his room, they'll fuck, and she leaves. And so it's this kind of stress relief for them. But in this book, we're seeing them come to kind of a crisis point in their back and forth, where it's like, I want this to be more. I don't just want this to be for survival. Like, we are set up well enough now that, like, we're going to live. Like, we're going to live. We're going to be a place where, you know, people can count on. We're going to start a community. We already have one. So I want more than just someone for stress relief. So that's what this one is them figuring that out, and them deciding to become a haven, right? They're New Haven. They're deciding to become a place where they will work with Mac. They will work with people. They will give supplies and trade supplies and give people a safe place. And they're discussing how that gets set up here. So highly recommend, if you want to check out the Kindle series, you can start with this one. As I said, I like Last Light the best. That one's a full book, but if you just want a taste of her, this is a great place to start. So I love revisiting this one. This is a 4-star book for me because there is like not a ton of other story that happens in them, but I love them. This is a solid series for me. And this is a 3 on the spice scale. There's lots of some good sexy times in here, but this is still an apocalypse story. So there is some death and gore and violence and illness in here. So it packs a punch for sure. Okay, then I read Save Me by Tiffany Patterson. This was a wonderful book. Oh my gosh, I had such a good time with it. So this is book 3 in the Townsend Legacy series, and I have actually read book 1, which was also an audiobook to review from Must Love Audio. And this is book 3. So they never offered a book, they never offered book 2. And so I was like, did I miss it? You know, they have signups kind of weekly for which books you want to review. And I was like, did I miss book 2? I was confused. So after I finished book 3, which again, we'll get into it, I was like, well, I want to read book 2. I'm really liking this author. Let me go, you know, find it. Well, book 2 doesn't have an audiobook. So I was confused that we're doing 1 and 3. I don't know. I don't know why we skipped it, whatever. But I'm going to be reading book 2 whether there's an audiobook or not for it, because the setup for book 2 sounds amazing. It's a friends to lovers, and like, we'll save it because I'm going to read it. I downloaded it already. I just want to find out if we're going to get ALCs for that one or not, because if we will, then I'll wait. But if we don't, I'm going to read it because it was exciting. But anyway, Save Me has a very tough beginning. So we have Day, and I'll just say it at the beginning. This is an Asian man, Black woman romance written by a Black woman. Although I do believe that, Kennedy's family is biracial. I don't know. Whatever. It was wonderful. Wonderful diversity in this book, whichever those were. But Day is an Asian man. And in the beginning of this, Kennedy and her family are actually visiting, I think they're in Korea. I think that's where they were. And Day is actually having the living hell beaten out of him. And he actually was going to unalive himself. So all of this is happening this night. Kennedy, who I believe is 17 at the time, her family is going on this like world tour visit and everything, which you find out more about in there. And she actually has like come across this that's happening, and she is like, stop beating him up right now. And Day is just very like, woman, just let them kill me, like I want to die anyway, and all this stuff. But anyway, she ends up stopping from happening, and she wants to help him because he's left there beaten, but he gets away because he doesn't want to explain what he was gonna do. But he ends up keeping her handkerchief. She uses a handkerchief to dab his blood, and there's this handkerchief with her initials on it, KT, and he keeps it. And after she saved him, it changes his life. He decides he wants to live. He decides he wants to, you know, make a go of life and not be this way, and, you know, turn things around in his life. And he also becomes obsessed with Kennedy. So then we skip forward 10 years, I believe it is. So now she's 27. She's actually an investigative reporter. Her family, very wealthy. This is the town. She's the Townsend. So she has all things at her fingertips, but she's really wanted to forge her own career. So she very much hasn't wanted any nepotism or any family help to get her anywhere. And she's a reporter, and she's looking into the case of this woman who was a supposed unaliving. But I believe it happened at a place of work. And she's just very suspicious about this death and doesn't believe that it's an unaliving of herself. And so she starts looking into it. At the same time, Day, this company that she's going to be looking into is one that he has worked with before. I don't fully know the business part, but either way, she ends up wanting to have a meeting with this guy named Day. And she doesn't recognize him, right, when they meet. But he knows who she is because he's been stalking her all these years, basically all these years. In fact, he actually lives in the building across from her and watches her at night. He has done many, many things to watch her over the years. He's done many things that have helped her in her career that she doesn't even know about. He's been this silent watcher, and he's been preparing his life for the time when he'll make his move. And it just so happens that she's making the first move without even knowing it, because she's needing to talk with him about this thing. And so now he's like, this is my chance. This is my opening. And so he actually makes her this offer that he'll help her with this if she will give her self to him. And she's like slapped him and was like, I'm not sleeping with you for info. And he is like, I didn't ask for you to sleep with me. I asked for you to give me time. You'll sleep with me eventually anyway. So he's very cocky and she does not like it, but she also does at the same time. She's very drawn into him. So eventually she ends up agreeing to a couple of dates with him. And I will tell you my favorite one. So she ends up picking the date in the beginning and she's like, let's go to the shooting range, which she is very talented in self-defense and her weapons because her parents have made sure she is, right? She's a high value target. And she refuses to have a bodyguard all the time, so she has to know these things. But she thinks she's going to scare him a little bit by showing him how good of a shot that she is. Meanwhile, he has rented out the entire place, so they have it completely to themselves. And after he watches her shoot, which she's very good, he picks up the gun, and I mean, it's definitely showing off, but he like shoots and aims and just like empties the whole clip right in the center. And she's like, I thought you'd never been to a shooting range. And he's like, I never said I hadn't held a gun before. And he reveals that he'd actually been in the military before. So she's just like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to show him up. So anyway, the chemistry between them is crazy, but she's still trying to write her article and he's kind of trying to protect her from the info she's trying to get because some of it would be very dangerous, blah, 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 all this. But he's obsessed with her, and this is his chance, and he's going to have her. So he's a very obsessive man. He is stalking. This is more dark than light, but gosh, it was so hot. Day is so sexy, you guys. This has multiple things that I love within it, okay? I recently made a post on my Instagram that is micro tropes that I love, and some of the top ones that I have are he keeps a trinket from her for years. He buys her a pet. A hero loves children as his own that aren't his, like all these little tropes. One of them is actually he braids her hair or does her hair. This man has learned how to do her hair. So there's one time where her hair gets wet and she's like, oh my gosh, now I'm going to have to do my hair. It's such a pain, right? He had learned how to take care of black curls so that he could do her hair for her. That's not even something that I have to deal with, right? And I was swooning, like melting over it. And so is Kenny. He buys the right pillowcases for her hair. Like, I mean, this does freak her out a little bit, but she's also like, how can I not just be into it? So anyway, really like this book. The story itself about the suspense element, I wasn't the hugest fan of that part, but please, Day and Kennedy, like, love it. And then also her going up against his dad at one point. You know, her dad is not going to be cool with this guy having been stalking his daughter all these years, but it was great. So I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars because, again, I didn't love the suspense element as much. This was narrated by Maggie Thompson and Matt Mercurio. And again, this was just wonderful. This is the second Tiffany Patterson I've read, and I definitely want to read more. I already wanted to read the series about the parents, because there is the series about Kennedy and her brother was the one in the first book, and this is Kennedy, and they're twins. And in the original series, I know that they were like secret babies to their dad. These twins were. So I know that just from reading these, the context of it, and Patience is their mother. And I believe like his Patience or something is the first book. So I definitely want to get to those eventually. I just don't know when. But I also want to read the second book in the series, which we skipped somehow. Wasn't sure how. So yeah, I gave that one 4.5. It is a 4 on the spice scale for sure. There's some edging, some kitty spanking, some binding. Like there's some hot stuff in this one. So I highly recommend. Then we are getting near the end of this here. I told you this would be a long one. I reread Lethal Balance by Cherise Sinclair. This was again is for a patron. So this is the second book in the Sons of the Survivalists. This is these group of guys who live in Alaska and they've been challenged by their adoptive father who's died to help revitalize this small town. This one is about JJ, who is a female police officer who gets hired by our hero from the first one, Gabriel, because he had to fire one of his previous guys, and he's been like the only law enforcement officer in the town lately. So he hires JJ, but JJ is actually leaving in kind of scandal. Being a female police officer in the precinct that she was in was very difficult. She was not treated very well there, and she kind of had to leave in shame type of situation. Kind of a bummer. So she doesn't want to mess around with anyone in this town. She's like, I'm here to work. I'm here to start fresh. I don't want to deal with it. Well, Cazador is he's a nurse practitioner in this town. He's really the only medical professional that's in rescue. And he is Gabriel's adopted brother. And when her and him meet each other, actually, before she starts her job, they almost hook up, but they don't because she's had a couple drinks. And so he's like, not going to do anything. And then discovers she's going to be the cop. And she's like, I don't want to be involved with anybody in this town because I don't need the rumors. I know how small towns go. And he's like, I understand. Off limits. Got it. Well, also very early on in the story, he finds out that he has a daughter. He has a 9-year-old daughter who the mother has recently died, and finally he was reached out to for. So he is a surprise dad in this, which I also love those type of stories. So this was a really good one. I love this whole story, but it is pretty cheesy. It's one of those that it's about as cheesy as its cover says it is, but I've read this series 3 times. The audiobooks are really good, and it's so close to my heart, and that's why this patron has picked these for me to reread and annotate, because they know how much I love them, and they love them too. So this is a 4-star book for me. It's a 2.5 on the spice scale, and it's a good time. Okay, then we have A Second Look by River Writer, and this was another Dramini that I read, and guys, I love this one so much. So I actually will be filming an updated fan fiction video very soon. Hoping to film it today. We'll see. I have a lot to film today. We'll see if I get to it. And this one is definitely within the favorites of the year of my fanfics I've read. It was just so, so good. And it was just so sweet. This one is very like swoony, and like there's not a lot of angst in it at all. It was just delightful. So this one is Single Dad Draco. Baby Scorpius is only like 8 months old. Very cute. We don't always get him as a baby. Draco is recently divorced from Astoria, who Astoria was never really involved anyway. She really was just married for the money, and she knew she had to provide an heir to him, and then she was like, peace out. I'm out of here. And Draco is struggling at the beginning of this. He is outside the apothecary, and Scorpius is crying because he's teething, and nothing magical is working. So he's just at his wit's end. And Hermione happens to run into him, and they haven't seen each other in years. They don't talk. She knows he's recently divorced, and she sees his baby, and she sees how harumphed he looks and just how desperate he is. And so she just extends some compassion and is like, hey, do you need some help? I know when my nieces and nephews or godchildren, which is Harry's kids, she's like, I actually use something muggle to help. Is that okay? And he's like, anything, try anything. So she actually makes like a teething ring and gives it to Scorpius, and that helps immediately. And he's just like, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm willing for any help you'll give me. And she's like, well, if you're willing for something else muggle, I do have some, it's literally like gum cream that she's like, that I get in the muggle world if you're up for it. And he's like, yeah, let's try it. I'm totally willing. So he actually comes back to her flat with her, and she's actually just getting James like dropped off. Little James gets dropped off for her to watch him. She is helping Harry, because Harry and Ginny actually recently were divorced, so he's a single dad. And so she helps out all she can. And Draco ends up hanging out like all afternoon. They watch a movie with little James, and Scorpius ends up falling asleep at her house, and they just have this great day together, getting to know each other kind of for the first time in a long time. And Harry thinks it's kind of weird when he comes to pick up James, but he's also like, hey, I mean, okay. Harry's a little, but he's just like, all right, cool. And the next day, Draco sends her some flowers and basically asks to see her again. And so they do. And before we know it, they're dating each other. And it's just this very beautiful slow burn between them of like, you know, he's changed so much and she's changed so much, and she loves seeing him be a dad. She falls in love with Scorpius just as easy as she does with him. And it's just, it was so perfect. Like, I just loved it. There was a little bit of plot at the end of this that had to do with something dangerous we discover, and even how we deal with that, I really liked it. So I gave this one 5 stars. I loved it so much. I'll have the link to it down below. It's a 2.5 on the spice scale. It's not an overly spicy one. It does have some open door scenes in it, but it is rated mature instead of explicit, which means it's more at a 2.5. But honestly, this Draco is just so swoony that I didn't need more than that. But there is still some really good scenes at the end of this one. So definitely recommend it. If you love fan fiction, definitely try this one. It was so good. It was so sweet. And then the final book that I finished this week. See, I told you I had so many. It was a great week. I finished another audio review yesterday. This is basically what I read just all day yesterday. It was so good. Was Northern Twilight by Samantha Young. And this one is actually one for my August TBR, but they actually sent us the audiobooks early, and I just couldn't wait because I was so hyped for this one. Skies Over Caledonia was only my first book by this author, but I'm continuing with this series, and I'll go back to the beginning once it's finished. There's at least one more book in this series. I believe it already has a title that I think it's called like Always Scotland or something. I don't know, but there's at least one more in this one. But this one is a friends to lovers between Callie and Lewis. And so this was kind of interesting because there's a bit of a time jump between the last book and this one. I don't know how many years it was, but I think it was like maybe 3 to 5 years or so. I don't know, because the characters from the last one, they now have like a little kid. And so it's definitely been a couple years. But Callie and Lewis are children of different couples in her world that she's had. Lewis is an Adair, and Callie is Ironside. Callie Ironside is her name. So they were actually high school sweethearts. They lost their virginity to each other. They've loved each other for a very long time. And something happened when they were 18, when Lewis was moving away, and everything kind of exploded. And they have both longed for each other since then. So this is a second chance, and I was a little nervous because it does have quite a few flashbacks in the beginning, but I'll get into why. It ended up working for me very well because this is a surprise pregnancy where they run into each other at a event in London where they are both there for an event, and they end up, Lewis invites her back to his place because he wants to talk to her because, again, he's never stopped thinking about her, and he's like, oh my God, she's here, I want to talk to her. And they end up hooking up with each other, and she runs away the next day because she's just like, I can't. But it turns out that he's moving back to the small town. And she actually has moved back recently after getting her degree in like being a pastry chef, and she comes back to work at her mom's bakery. And so we're all in this small town again, and Lewis is like, I'm going to win her back. But it's also a surprise pregnancy, so you add that into it. But there's a lot that they have to work through about why it didn't work out when they were young. And I was a bit conflicted in that beginning part too, because I was like, oh, this is a miscommunication. But there were some reasons why they broke up. And sure, they might feel kind of paper thin, but they were a big deal when they were kids. You know, when they were 18-year-olds, it was a big deal. And the way that the heroine has to work through a lot of her issues, I really respected how Samantha Young handles that. Because there were some things, man, where I was like, this is your fault, girl. You know, I was like blaming Callie for this. Because you just see how much Lewis was hurt by what happened. I will say, nobody cheated on each other, nothing like that. It was other things. So you're not bitter about like a cheating. We're not having to forgive that. It was just some other things, which again, I don't want to spoil them because they were so annoying when I was listening to it. But as I'm listening, I'm like, yeah, but if I was 18, it would bother me too. And then if you are so heartbroken about it, you refuse to dig deeper, that's just going to fester and grow and be awful. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It really worked for me. I loved this couple so much. There isn't a third act breakup. There is some suspense to this one that doesn't have to do with a stalker or anything weird. It worked for me. And yeah, I love a surprise pregnancy, and I love what happens between the two of them, and I love how their families love each other and how they just want things to work out for them. And so I enjoyed this one. I gave it 5 stars. It was narrated by Zara Hampton Brown and Shane East, who are both doing Scottish accents. Hello, could it be any more wonderful? Like, oh my God, it was so good. I loved it. All the Scottishness made me so happy. So yeah, I gave this one 5 stars. It's a 3 on the spice scale. Lewis is a tattooed. He rides bikes. He's an architect. He's so sexy, guys. Like, oh, I could just picture him so clearly. And then the way that he's narrated by Shane, I was just like, oh, so into it. It was so good. So good. So yeah, highly recommend that one. It comes out on August 8th, I think. So not too long to wait at all. So there we go. Those are the 12 books that I read this week. That's great. Definitely check them out down below. If you use my affiliate links, it really does help out the channel. There's also a special that's happening this month. So the more stuff that my viewers buy, the better for the channel, which is fantastic. And then don't forget the Etsy sale. 3 items or more is 30% off. That's one of the best deals that there is on my Etsy, so definitely check that out. And yeah, make sure you give this a thumbs up, comment down below. All of that helps out with engagement and keeps me moving on. The summer is actually some of the worst times on our channel, just so you know. It's usually January and like June and July that are kind of the worst for a channel. So any support you can give with liking and commenting, sharing this with anyone, that all helps us out. So thank you so much for watching, my friends, and we'll see you next time. Bye.